Thank you, everybody, for coming for this event today, Fashion and Entertainment, a conversation with Amy Bond. I'm Bethany Irons. I am the new director of the Stevens Satellite Center location for the Lillian Lodge Kopenhaver Center. I wanted to first thank Dr. Kopenhaver and the Kopenhaver Center at FIU, as well as Rowan University for partnering with us and including Stevens College in these wonderful conversations and workshops. And this talk is being recorded and transcribed. The recording will be available online shortly after this, including on our website, kopenhaver.stevens.edu. I do ask that you keep muted during the talk. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. And I hope you do have questions. But I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for today, Amy Bond. Amy is a 92 graduate of Stevens College, and she is a fashion designer, producer, and educator. She competed on Project Runway season 16 and was also a supervising fashion producer of Next in Fashion, a fashion design competition that debuted on Netflix. I'm going to quote Amy here. She has said, Project Runway season 16 taught me that leaps of faith are necessary and exciting, regardless of where they land you. Working with and around such diverse talent reinforced to me that change and growth are always possible, and the opportunity to do both should never be turned down. I believe when you have something to give, you should share it with those who make an effort to receive. So I wanted to thank her for her willingness to share with us today. So without further ado, welcome Amy Bond.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So I'm wondering if you might talk first a little bit about your career and your trajectory, and then any advice that you would give to aspiring designers out there and students, what things that you've learned along the way.
I graduated in '92 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Fashion Design, and my senior specialty was in bridal. So that was kind of where my mind was at the time. I was able actually to get a job. This was, you got to remember, this is pre-internet. So imagine, if you can, what it was like getting a job in those days. But lots of phone calls, lots of, literally paper ads in the back of WWD. But there I found a bridal designer, was looking for help. Phone calls I was living in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This designer was in Virginia with her showroom in New York. So there was a lot of, there was no Zoom calls or anything like that. Just a lot of phone calls and resumes in the mail. And she hired me over the phone basically. And then, so I picked up, and that's another one, that's probably the first major leap of faith. Packed up all my stuff and moved to Charlottesville, Virginia to start working. She was the designer for Arnold Scaasi, who you may or may not heard of if you're into fashion history. He was a huge 80s designer. So it was really an amazing opportunity, but a really hard job. Trial by fire, as they say. But that was the beginning of my path. I was there for several years, moved to another bridal designer, Thomasina, for about 6 years. And then after cutting my teeth, watching these small businesses, and well, Scaasi wasn't a small business, but this was a smaller division within it. Thomasina was one of those designers who built everything from the ground up her absolute self. After watching all that, experiencing all that, I decided it was time to strike out on my own. So New Year's, well, it was Christmas 1999, I packed up U-Haul truck, the cat, the dog, all my stuff, and drove from Pittsburgh to Los Angeles, California. Arrived New Year's Eve, 1999. No place to live, no job, bunch of stuff in a U-Haul. Lived in Motel 6 for 2 weeks, still found a loft in what was then the artist district. It was not any place anybody really wanted to live. Imagine Soho in the very early days. It was rough, let's just put it like that, but it was cheap. So I managed to set up a little factory, lived in the factory, is a similar space to this, and just started producing my own clothing line. And we just did everything ourselves. And it was put the clothing on a rack and go from store to store, literally come to the front of the store and be like, hey, is your buyer in? I've got this new collection here. But in doing that door-to-door thing was super hard, but again, pre-internet or the beginning of the internet at the very least by that point. But what it meant to the buyers was that somebody was willing to take their time to show up at their doorstep. versus them going to a market, versus them having to receive literally a printed catalog to go through. Here was the clothes in front of them. So it was really a great, it was my key to success in that case, because that's how I got all the orders, was actually showing up and talking and letting them see the clothes, and then coming back to the factory and making them, essentially. So it was always a very grit-based kind of person. Like that's what my whole early career was based on, was this kind of like roll up your sleeves sort of attitude with that. But doing the collections and selling wholesale led me to actually decide to go into my own business retail wise. So we opened a store where we just sold our own clothing. And this was in 2000 and 2000, right at 2000 is when we opened it. And we managed to get this amazing space in Pasadena, California. We were a little ahead of our time. This is the concept I thought was amazing, where we had, you walked into the showroom and then there was an upper floor that you could see. And so we put all the sewing equipment there and all the sewers, and like you could see everything being made. So you walked into the showroom, you could pick out the clothing you liked. We didn't have the size, we would make it for you upstairs, and you come back, a couple of days and get it. But in those days, that's when the Gap was exploding. That's when there was like Alan Schwartz, and like, long story short, people didn't get it really. It was a little too much. Like, what do you mean you're going to make it? Clothes aren't made, they come from China. It's just this kind of disconnect between the actual craft of clothing and shopping for clothing. So, I think that concept now would be, and is very successful. There's businesses that do very similar, kind of made to order in front of you sort of things. But at that time, it was a struggle to get people to understand that. But what I did learn through that experience is I was really interested in teaching. So when people would come in, I wanted to talk about the clothes, how things are made, and this is what this seam is. So that really led me into teaching fashion rather than just trying to sell it. And that was kind of my entree into that side of things. And so in between there, skip around a little bit. I've had various businesses of my own. I do a lot of consulting work for other businesses, sample making, pattern making, design development, product development, that kind of thing. I've been doing that pretty much since I started teaching. And then Project Runway just kind of fell out of the sky, literally. It's still kind of a whirlwind to me, going from casting, the initial to the casting. It was like a heartbeat. Something I never thought I'd do. Like, reality TV was not my thing. Never really watched Project Runway. I just didn't. Certainly no slide on the show, obviously, but it just was not the sort of thing I'd watch from day one. So I went in a little unawares, although I tried to watch some back catalog to it. But that was an amazing experience. It was just really cool. And it was very cool to be able to get onto a national platform to kind of have a chance to discuss your work. My personal experience with it wasn't as robust as some of the other people, where they really got a chance to talk to the judges about what they were doing. I never made it to one of the finals. Like, they never put me in the top 3 of anything. And I was never in the bottom except the team challenges. And then I got cut right before the finals. So I always wanted a chance to be like, hey, don't you see how amazing what I'm doing is? But fortunately, it's out there. So if somebody finds it amazing, then they can review it on their own. And then that led me to being picked by Netflix, or by the producers of this particular show, to be the supervising fashion producer for Next in Fashion. And what that meant was they literally said, look, we know TV. They actually came from cooking shows. We know how to make competition shows. We don't know anything about fashion. So like, we're going to go do our thing, and you go do your thing, and you're responsible for everything fashion down to the last pin. So the autonomy in that job was incredible and a little scary, because I had no checks and balances as long as things looked good. So I was making it up as I went along, with, fortunately, the reality TV background, knowing what the designer side of things was, what the contestant side of things was. So understanding what it was that they needed. Also being a fashion designer and understanding what kind of things you need to make things, and then what the equipment should be and how the layout should be and what you need to kind of progress through garments, especially at that pace. So it was just like, I really always felt like that my life was leading up to that moment in so many ways, because that was my skill set. Like, all these weird things I had done, like these little elements of things just converged into that. So that was super cool. And I enjoyed that a lot. What I would say in terms of lessons, and this was sort of intuitive to me, but it turned out to be true, especially when I learned how they found me for Next in Fashion, is that it's just be nice to everybody. Everybody. Like, you do not know who you're talking to sometimes. You could sit down, especially in a place like LA, and end up talking, to somebody who looks like they're down on their luck, and it could be like a multi-million-dollar movie producer. It's like that. And what I meant about Next in Fashion is the way that I was picked for that, or they found me for that, is they had actually called, and I'd stopped full-time teaching several years before at Otis, although Otis College of Art and Design is where I teach now. Still, I've taught there since 2003. It's a good long relationship. But I'd stopped teaching full-time when I started Project Runway. But I still taught for extension, and I still, of course, had some good relationships with other professors. But they called the school. Just one of the producers called the school blind. They're like, "Oh, it's a fashion college. We'll call them." So they called up the fashion college. They're like, "Hello, fashion department. We need a fashion expert. Who would you recommend?" And I hadn't taught there for 3 years, but the beautiful person on the other end of the phone, who's going to be a goddess to me forever, said, "Oh, you need to talk to Amy Bond." And that's how that happened. And why did that happen? It's just because I'd formed really nice relationships along the way. Wasn't, the teacher of the year at Otis, because I was hardly even there. Frankly, the department chair and I had, didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but it's just because I had made these kind of good relationships with all the people that I worked with and all the people that worked in and around the department, that I was seen in a very positive light. And I would say the same thing about Project Runway. Like, everything we did was filmed. Like, if you want to know anything about my character, you can go watch it still. Like, you can Google me until Google blows up, which probably will happen someday. Meaning that, like, if I didn't have my own integrity, like if I couldn't act like myself all the time, it would have come out. And then they would have, busted me being obnoxious to somebody or saying something rude or, falling apart. But that never happened. And I look back on that with pride, being like, okay, really, I did live what I preach, which is, that kindness and that honesty and that integrity and that attitude of just forthrightness and bootstrapping and sleeve rolling and, just kind of getting it done sort of attitude. And not to, everybody tells you not to give up. Of course, don't give up, but set your sights on something that makes sense to you. Like, when I started out, bridal made sense to me. So I felt confident in that space to go start talking to companies about it. If right out of college, I'd been like, well, swimwear seems kind of interesting, and I just kind of went to something that seemed kind of interesting, then I wouldn't have really been able to stand up in front of the people that were interviewing me and say, hey, I really want a job in swimwear, because then it would have been a little less honest, although swimwear is interesting. I didn't have that as like my central passion at that moment. So having something that you really care about is a good way to approach a job, because then your honesty and your enthusiasm comes with you at that time too. And interviewing now is very different. I get that. Like, you're all behind these firewalls of these tagline words or whatever they call them, where the resume machines pick out the keywords from your resume, and you're already sorted and selected based on certain things. But once you can actually approach that and approach the field in the direction that you want to go in with some passion, then you're way more likely to get something more out of it. Did I cover all the things you said?
Yes. No, thank you. And I had watched a video with you where you had said that Project Runway was a chance to run straight off a cliff into design again. And I love that statement. What advice could you give to students or, designers just starting out about embracing the unknown and about resilience?
And that's exactly how it felt. I got to tell you exactly how it felt. Once I got there, I'm like, what am I doing? It's this. There's a lesson in everything. There's absolutely a lesson in everything. And as small as a teacher giving you a critique, or something you made and fitting beautifully or not fitting, or, from the biggest things to the smallest things, there's a lesson in everything. And the more you open up, the more lessons there are. So, running off that cliff, I've always said to kind of, my career is kind of like I'm always building the bridge under me as I go, which I wouldn't always recommend to people because it's an extremely stressful life. I'm not going to lie about that, because you're constantly, looking for the next plank to go under you. Well, that's my life decisions. I like that kind of chaos in a way. I like to have to think on my feet, and I like to have to be adaptable. But should you choose a more cautious route, which I completely respect and really would advise, just remember that there is a lesson in everything, and that there are no wrong turns necessarily. If you get a job and you hate the job, it's not the end of the world. It's kind of like, okay, so what can I take from this situation that is positive? And maybe it's a certain skill, maybe it's a certain relationship with a coworker, maybe it's just like getting a little thicker skin so that you immediately start interviewing other places to be able to get out of that bad situation. And whatever it is, there's literally a lesson in everything. So you have to stop when you get so upset and you're like, why is this happening to me? It's more like, okay, what can this teach me? That's a much better way to look at it. And then you can kind of start using those little building blocks for your next experience.
Thank you. Yeah. And you had mentioned kind of building a thicker skin. Being on Project Runway was obviously a very public endeavor. How did that level of publicity and attention on you and your brand, how did that really shape your practice, or did it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Anybody in the arts world, whether you're or creative world, I should say, whether you're a writer, whether you're a painter, whether you're a fashion designer, whether you have to have enough bravery to put yourself forward. And in doing that, you understand people are going to say some shit. Like not everybody's going to love you. People have things to say, and you have to understand that is going to happen. I remember when Project Runway first started airing, all the Reddit stuff, I would get comments from friends being like, oh my God, can you believe what they said about you on Reddit? I'm like, I'm not going to read that, because if I do, I'm going to assume that that's, true, or that has to affect me in some way. Like I have to process that. Like I don't have to process that. Like why should it matter? I just have to understand that I care about my craft enough to put it forward and just accept that not everybody's going to like what I do. And maybe not every work is my best work. But again, I always say, like, what can I learn from this? So that's kind of what I mean by the thick skin, isn't that it does get easier, the more that you're able to build your own confidence just by continuing to do what you do. And the world can point to so many artists across the ages. Picasso's always a famous one. Van Gogh, or was I thinking of Van Gogh? Anyway, there's a lot of painters who die before they're recognized, was the short and long of what I was trying to say. So it's all about you being passionate with your craft, whatever it is, and finding a way to survive through the world, literally like feeding yourself, and believing in that enough that is fulfilling for you. And it's not always easy, definitely not always easy, but it's not what people have to say about you. It's more what your lessons are, and also finding people that you trust, finding situations that you trust. And especially when you're in school, those critiques are amazing, and you shouldn't walk away from the critique with faculty being like, that teacher hates me. Like she always says my work is, it's more like, okay, I'm getting an evaluation from a professional. So what can I learn from this? I may not have to like what she has to say, but it's like, where are the lessons in that for me? So it's just kind of having complete bravery to take those chances. And you'll have to decide in your own life where your cliff is, how far you want to run. And, sometimes there's been opportunities where I've run to the end of the cliff and I'm like, okay, I don't see the bridge. I don't even have a plank to put underneath me right now. So I can't go that way. So I'll back up a little bit and see if I can go this way. But that's the only thing that propels you forward, otherwise you will be in that same spot if you don't take some kind of risks. And it's fun. I mean, life is fun, and it's fun to meet people in the creative fields. It's fun to discover different things to do. It's fun to find different pathways for your art. It's fun to find different artists to work with that are doing things in a different way, because there's something to learn from them. It's not a competition. I work with so many other fashion designers, and some of them are better than me at some things, and it's not really a scale of better or worse, but are more accomplished in certain areas. And there's some things that I'm more accomplished in, but by sharing those conversations together, it's more fun. It's like, I'm not in competition with you. I'm an artist just like you. So let's just have some fun. And I think I went off on a tangent there. But
No, that's great. Very, very helpful advice. And I want to mention, just because we had a few people joining us after we had started, but please feel free to put questions in the chat. We would love to, get to those. So you had talked about finding people that you trust. Can you describe the importance of collaboration in your career, and how do you find your people, or how do you find your people?
The whole tribe thing, right? Sometimes it comes really easy. Sometimes you just land in a spot. Stevens College was one of those spots for me. And usually college for everybody is that first spot where you find your tribe. You start to meet people and you start to gravitate towards certain people and especially if you're working in a department like fashion or anything that's a creative field where you find yourselves late nights together doing things, whether it's writing a paper or, finishing a presentation, whatever it is. And you can just kind of sort out, the people that you click with. And that, there's nothing more uplifting in life than relationships. I could sit here and make clothes all day long, but if I'm here in my own little tunnel, it's not fulfilling. Like, we are human because we need relationships. And when we can actually bring ourselves to creative bliss around other people and with other people, that there's just another level of elevation to that. But collaboration is important in a career because you can make all sorts of different contacts. Sean Ross was one of those for me. I trust Sean Ross. And the reason that I did is I just ended up moving next door to him. We ran to each other in the hallway. And it was right after Project Runway. And we looked at each other. And he's like, do I know you? And I'm like, don't I know you? And it's just one of those funny kind of moments. And so at first, I'm the fashion designer next door and he's the celebrity model dude. So of course I'm going to make him an outfit. But through that process, we became such close friends. And, we're at each other's houses all the time and built this true collaboration. So he'd be like, hey, I got this idea for this thing. I'd be like, yeah, let's make it. Or I'd be like, oh, you're going to such and such. I wanted to do this. They'd be like, yeah, let's do it. And that kind of energy is just, I could stay up for days on that kind of energy because it's just the excitement of somebody else tapping into your stream and you tapping into theirs to come up with something even more amazing than slaving away in the corner, shipping your stuff off to whatever celebrity, eventually seeing it on the screen, which is cool too. I've had friends who've dressed, Beyonce and all the pop stars like that. And then you see it, even if you're at the event, you can see it on stage. And that's a very exciting moment too. It just lacks that level of interaction that I think is so important. So, your tribe can always is the people that become your closest little creative circle, but it can expand into those bigger circles too, where you have those moments. But I never turn down an opportunity to meet with somebody. Like if anybody contacts me and just says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about ABC. I'm always like, all right, let's talk. Whatever it is, let's just talk about it. Because you just don't know what those opportunities or that person is going to be like. And I just think that's the coolest thing about life is discovering people and discovering what people bring to the table and how they see things. It's interesting to learn how people view the world and view themselves, and especially view things like art and what they see in creativity.
Zoom and social media has kind of become our one of the ways that we have we get exposure to others and to potentially collaborate with others too. And I see that you're on Instagram. You have a YouTube channel as well, yes? Or you're on YouTube. Your videos are on there.
I just can't edit.
Yeah. Oh no.
Push that.
But yeah, but you do have quite a following, and how would you say that social media and kind of these new ways of collaborating or communicating with people, how do you think that that's shaped your practice, if at all?
So you have to be super careful with who you're associating with on social media. How has it shaped my practice? When Instagram especially first came on the scene, amazing, because it's all visual. I found so many great artists to follow. I saw so many designers, young and fresh, and doing some fantastic things. And I just absolutely loved Instagram. And then they started changing all the algorithms, and they started bringing in all the ads. So it's changed from really a creative come together kind of place to really a mass market ad stream kind of thing. Do I still find value in it? I do, because it's a good way to keep in touch with the designers and artists and people that I already know. I find it much harder to find new content through those platforms than I used to. They don't, things don't show up for me like they used to, suggested, that are actually cool things. It's usually just somebody who's paid for an ad, and that's what you get sucked into. So it's less of a collaboration and artistic tool than I think it used to be. I don't know what we're moving into. Usually the way things go, like Facebook kind of started that way too. And then it became this disgusting giant. And then, so Instagram was born from that. And now maybe you could look at TikTok born from that. So I'm not sure what's going to be born from that next, but we definitely need for true creative people to trying to just meet other creative people or show their creativity or network, I guess would be the best word. We need a new platform, I think, for that. And I know Clubhouse tried, but that's all local, so like that doesn't really go anywhere. But I think it's still important because what it is an online portfolio, if nothing else, more so than a website, because people don't even really bother to go to websites so much anymore. Although you need that because it's a good compiler of all of your information, since Instagram has to be so edited and so short with what you say and what you put on it. But it's where your work can live. It's where you can actually design how you want to present yourself, at least on your feed and in your way. And I think that's still important because, especially in a limited amount of time, because I do work with so many brands on a freelance basis with product development. It's a way for them to just go instantly and be like, oh yeah, okay, I see this and this and this, or me to go to them and like, oh, I see what you've done here and here and here. So I think it's still important as an online portfolio almost, but less as a networking tool because it's just so hard to weed through the BS.
It's a double-edged sword for sure. Okay, well, I did want to ask, since there's a lot of women here today listening. How has, I'll keep it pretty generic here, but how has, being a woman in this field, how has that, I guess, shaped your career path, if it has?
Yeah, it definitely has. Fashion, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your perspective, is one of those industries that's always been very female heavy, at least behind the scenes. If we look at the top designers, if we're talking about couture, it's still run mostly by gay men, frankly. Gay white men kind of rule the world at that level. But in the actual grinding of fashion, it's always been women. The downside to that, and what I learned in my early career, is that a lot of women who scrap themselves to a certain point can be really mean to the people that are coming in under them. I mean, that first job I talked about, my first bridal job, like that woman was so mean. Like, we yell at everybody and like say things like, "You're the slime that crawled in under my door. Why are you here?" And when all you're doing is trying to work for them and make nice things and then earn a living, basically. So that whole women on women violence thing has been a core part of the fashion industry for so long, and fashion journalism too. We all know Devil Wears Prada. That's not an exaggeration. Like, it really is like that, going more towards the was, but really now that things are so much more open and like, I don't know if you guys follow Instagrams like Diet Prada, and then the Estee Laundry one that talk about inside the beauty industry and inside the fashion industry. Those are both very interesting Instagrams to follow, because then employees are stepping forward and saying, hey, this was my experience with this brand. I worked for so-and-so for this many years, and this is what happened to me. So it's so much more public that everybody's behavior is now on call. Unfortunately, that's what it takes sometimes to change, instead of somebody just going, oh my God, I'm being really mean to this person. Like, why do I have to be mean to this person? And usually the answer to that is, oh, because so-and-so was mean to me. So, it's that bully trickle down theory. But now that it's all getting kind of called out on this level, I think women are really banding together more in the industry for the first time and actually supporting each other. So it's more like, hey, I see this young person, this young woman coming through, and I don't want her to suffer the way that I suffered. That has been one of my main philosophies since I got out of that job. I'm like, I am never, ever treating anybody like I was treated. I don't care what I suffered. In my perspective, I suffered through that so that nobody else has to. And I want to be a revolution within the industry to change how people are treated all the way through. And so I've done that with my students. I've done that with anybody that's ever worked for me. I've done that with anybody I've ever collaborated with. And it's honestly I think the more love you share, the more there is out there that the person can take and then move on to the next scenario. So I think being female had definitely affected that. If I had come into the industry, and I've seen it with some of the guys that come into the industry, they are treated differently. It is kind of it's a different thing. And especially in the early days of the industry, you'd notice that all your coworkers were female if you're in the design room, but the bosses were all male. So it tended to be this, very stratified sort of situation where women were expected to work really hard and do this level of work, but they weren't here necessarily. But there's been so many positive female run companies now that have sort of flipped that on its head. And hopefully it becomes like a very good balloon effect where everybody starts to look at the industry that way as collaboration, not as power structure so much.
Yeah, and find your support system. Like you had mentioned in the beginning of our chat, there was somebody who said your name in a room where, somebody was looking for a designer, right? And that's how you got started. And treating everybody with kindness and respect, because you never know who you are talking to as well. Okay, so we have a question in the chat here from Jennifer Toll, who is our new director of the agency here at Stevens. She says, I appreciate your view on the lessons in life, and you seem to have a great attitude and outlook. Can you share any of the resources, people, and or things outside of fashion or TV that have been helpful to you on your journey?
It's funny because over the I've had a weird, just to be personal, I've had a weird path over these last 2 years. Everyone has with COVID, of course, but pivoting to online teaching was number one. Then a lot of businesses that I was working with kind of shut down or had to go on hiatus just because they weren't able to sustain themselves through COVID. So we watched the world kind of crash around all of that. And then I was actually diagnosed with breast cancer during all that, just last May. So I had to really kind of sit with myself and go, I can either go one of two ways. Woe is me. Why does God hate me? Like, why me? I can't believe this is happening. Or kind of like, what can I learn from this? And that's why I always go back to that. What can I learn from this? What can I do with this? And so what I did was really start a spiritual journey, I guess you could call it, meditation practice. I was already doing a little yoga, but really that was more for exercise, but learning how to do meditation. And actually what I recommend is called Ziva meditation, Z-I-V-A meditation. This woman, Emily, it's basically a meditation practice, but we all say to ourselves, I think, if you've ever tried to meditate, I can't meditate. I can't quiet my brain. I can't sit still that long. I have ADD, so I have that problem. I'm like, there's no way I can sit here for 5 minutes. I can barely sit here for 2. But what she teaches and the philosophy behind that, and a lot of other meditation teachers, is that it's really not about telling yourself to shut up. You don't quiet your mind, you allow your thoughts in, and you just kind of sit with your thoughts. So when you look at it from that perspective where, I'm just gonna sit here and think for a little bit. And if I wander over here, that's okay. I can pull myself back here. It's like, you can't fail at it when you look at it from a perspective of whatever happens to you during the 10 minutes that you choose to sit down is fine. Then you will never fail at it. And just learning how to kind of to be quiet and center has been super important for me, because otherwise, you're bouncing off the walls all day long. So that's been important. And I also like to read and listen to a lot of historically esoteric or like spiritual teaching kind of stuff from Dalai Lama into some more contemporary things like Mitch Horowitz, who's a writer who writes a lot about hidden America and occult America is actually where he started, but kind of self-help, but more like shifting perspective instead of like, you're not looking in the mirror every day and going, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself, because even you won't believe you, but more like, hey, like, how can I shift my perspective to perhaps take this in a more positive direction instead of just looking at all the why me's. Maybe it's like, okay, where do I go from here instead? And so I adopted that kind of perspective just before cancer diagnosis. And really, that's probably what saved my life, because I got through all of it without falling apart. And you see me now healthy. I've just been declared cancer free. I finished radiation 2 weeks ago. So thank you. I know it's like from May till where are we now? October, and I'm done. So, having that kind of center within yourself is extremely important. And if it was just about work or just about life, then that's still important. But when you hit these major obstacles, COVID for some of us was one of them. And then personally, the cancer thing was for me, then you got a place to come back to, no matter else what happens. So I think that's important. It's the spiritual health thing. Of course, we know how to take care of our bodies, or what we should be doing anyway, but having that spiritual health is really the anchor, and it helps your creativity because you don't feel so like scared and upset and like, stress makes you stupid. When you get too stressed out, you're like, that's when you can't find your keys. That's when you're like, oh my God, I just cut that thing backwards. Like, why did I, and that feeling. So like, if you can get rid of letting your mind go there, then you can prevent so much of that other crazy stuff from happening. It's possible.
And that's wonderful news. First, but yeah, and I think it's great advice that you don't have to always be go productive all of the time. I think that there's a lot of productivity in just sitting with yourself and not necessarily doing things, and just quieting your mind and being with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Can be very productive,
and
necessary.
It doesn't have to have, meditation around it. It just has to be like, relax, just, and then the whole trying to sit Indian style thing, that's the other thing that always killed me. Like, I could never meditate because I thought you're supposed to sit like cross-legged, and then you had to do the thing with your hands. Like, to me, that's super uncomfortable. But Ziva meditation also teaches you, sit in a chair, just relax, put your shoulders against it, just sit like a normal person. And then you can find yourself relaxing more. When you take all the rules of what you think you're supposed to do, finding that relaxation moment, because we've all, even in an airport, when you put your head down, you like close your eyes for 5 minutes, you feel so much better. That's basically a meditation. You're basically already doing it. But when we put labels on it, it becomes difficult. But doing that is what inspires your creativity. It's not even, oh, I'm so busy, I can't. It's kind of like, oh, because I'm busy, I'm going to do this first, so I'm better at being busy, would be the way I'd put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And unless anyone has any other questions, I thought I could just kind of cap it off. A lot of, our students are on today, and I know one of the common questions I seem to get a lot as a teacher is, okay, I'm graduating soon. Where do I start? And we try to prepare students as much as we can for that. But what do you say to your students that come to you and they're like, what's the first step? What do I do, right when I graduate?
Graduated from fashion college. Obviously, there's still a lot of fashion colleges, but it wasn't as competitive as it is now. There are so many students out there ready to launch their lives, competing for kind of the same opportunities. So I understand it. It is super challenging. What I would say is get yourself clear on what it is you really want to do. So if you want to start your own company, for instance, if you want, and a lot of, Stevens was always very good about encouraging its students to be very independent. So, a lot of us came out of there, instead of being like, oh, I can't wait to get a job, it was more like, I want to do my own thing. But that's there, unless, you're fortunate to be the daughter of some Saudi Arabian millionaire, you got a ways to go to get there. So start by getting clear on what it is you want to do. If that is your goal, then understand there's steps to get there. If your goal is just to get a really great job, or I want to live in New York City, so I need a really great job, get clear on that goal. Find your one true focus, find your one true goal. And then it's going to be about the steps to get there. So if that goal is to move to New York and get a good job, then first thing you do is what? Search all the companies that are in New York, figure out who, what, when, where, why, find out what the base salary is. Now you can research anything you want to in 5 seconds, find out what the base salary is. Can I survive on that? Okay. If I'm going to make this much money, how many dozens of roommates do I have to be able to live in New York City on a starting salary? Figure out like the nuts and bolts of what this is going to take. And then once you understand that, then pick the companies you want to apply to. Do I want to go into sportswear? Am I interested in technical design? Am I whatever. And of course I'm focusing on fashion, but it could be anything within that. If you wanted to go into tech in New York, same kind of thing. It's like, so what would be the steps to get there? Okay, so I need that entry level job. All right, so let's go to Style Careers. Let's go to Indeed. Let's go to everywhere and see who's posting jobs right now. And then figure out what it's going to take for me to apply. Spend time on that resume, spend time on that portfolio. Don't be stubborn about it. Take all the advice from professionals that you can get. I've seen a lot of adults, especially, they're like, my resume is fine. It's good. It's good the way it is. Like, well, things have changed. You should look at what resumes need to look like these days, especially because, like, I started off complaining about those, all the sifting tools that HR people use to look for those keywords and all the rest of it. Learn the game, play the game, figure out what the game is and get good at it. And just understand everything is going to be incremental, and that each stage is going to teach you something about that next stage. So it's the patience in that. Everybody wants to get out of school and then launch into like the most amazing career. Well, it could happen, but there's still steps to get there. But just understand true goal and then the steps that it's going to take, and to be patient about that. Set yourself that 5-year goal. Just know it will take a little while, and be ready to accept that.
Yes, that's excellent advice. I saw that Jacqueline Wolverton has a question.
Hello, Amy. So I have to say, I graduated from Stevens in 2002, and your name has always been out there. So when I saw this posted on Instagram, I couldn't wait to jump on and see who Amy Bond was. So,
well, nice to meet you.
yeah, so, I feel like I got my break really from Kirsty Buchanan there. And she helped me get my foot in the door at Nordstrom just through who we knew. And would you say that that still carries a lot of weight? Because I feel like, Indeed, getting through that firewall, as you said earlier, do you think that those relationships and having that way in the door potentially is still to advantage for these girls?
Yeah, good question. And that's, number one, still number one, who you know. Yeah, I'm speaking on the steps from an abstract perspective. If you don't know anybody, but always ask friends, mentors, friends' parents, mentors' parents. Hey, do you know anybody at Ralph Lauren? Hey, have you ever worked with somebody here? Or, hey, I'm interested in retail. Have you ever? Absolutely access your teachers, your friends, your friends' parents can be amazing. And still, like to this day, like when somebody needs some, especially with my clients, like they'll always, instead of putting an ad out for like a sample maker, they'll call me and be like, hey, who do you know that's a good sample maker? Hey, who do you know that does this? And that is still how the industry works. That's still how life works. Because everybody wants some degree of comfort and trust in whoever they're hiring and whoever's coming to the table. So like, when you get an introduction from someone like Kirsty, then that person on the other end knows, oh, okay, I can trust this person. I trust Kirsty. So this person that she's bringing to the table, I'm definitely going to give more consideration to than I might be somebody that's cold calling me through an ad. So absolutely hit up anybody and everybody that could help you in any way in your field. And that can be strangers too. Like I get emails all the time from people that will just be like, hey, I really, you don't know me, but I followed you on Instagram, or I watched Project Runway or whatever. And it's like, could you help me? Do you know anybody in Los Angeles that's hiring for this? Or, I want to be a screen printer. Do you know anybody that I could internship for? Things like that. People ask me all the time, and I'm always willing to help. Never be afraid, especially with DMs, because it's so freaking easy to just DM people that you follow, that you're interested in, that are doing something that you want to do, that look like they have a connection to somebody that you want to have a connection with, and just ask nicely. Don't take too much of people's time. Don't be like, hey, can I, pick your brain? That's the worst thing. Never say that. Never say, can I pick your brain? Because that assumes that like you're just going to spend too much time, needling somebody, but more like, had a quick favor or just a quick question, respect what you do, looking to do this, do you have any advice or any way you could help? And generally people are very responsive to that. So it's an excellent point. I don't mean it to be like you have to just work through Google and the internet and, do all these abstract very impersonal things. If you can do the personal thing first, that's absolutely the best way to start.
Excellent. And thank you for the question. All right, we do have President Dr. Diane Lynch on the chat here. She says, hi, Amy, thanks so much for doing this for us. So what's next in your own creative journey? What's the horizon you're headed for this year, 5 years?
Hello, nice to see you. Not entirely sure, to be honest. A couple things are happening right now, and they're all pretty interesting. I'm in Pasadena, California right now, but if you can tell, it looks rather barren because I'm actually just leaving the studio. I'm moving out of this particular space. One of the things during Cancer Journey is that we took a place in Miami Beach. So heading to Miami Beach from here, I know, like, it's so funny leaving California to go to Florida. Like, I'm like some weird reverse snowboard, right? It's so cold in California in the winter. I have to leave. But I'm just going for a change of scenery. And so I packed up on my studio. I'm actually putting it in storage here. I'm going to go hang out in Miami Beach for a couple months. I actually have started working with a company called FitMatch. What I'm interested in right now is 3D technology, is in 3D body scans to create patterns and in 3D pattern making and in the whole metaverse that is going to contain. So that's really where my mind is, my interest is, and what I'm moving into. This company is located in Fort Lauderdale, coincidentally. I did some consultations with them here, consulted for them here in LA, but in going there, I hope to get a little more robust with what they're doing at the home office. And I'm planning to work more digitally in general. You know, I'll never give up my craft, but I'm finding that I spend less and less time on my machines, you know, in this tactile way, and more time kind of conceptualizing in a more digital landscape. So that's definitely my next step. Where it's going to happen, not entirely sure. You know, I'm still with Otis, so I'm still teaching, obviously online, but I'll always have a home base here in California. We still have a place in Orange County, so I'm gonna be a little multi-coastal for a little bit, and focusing in on that digital universe, I think. So if you have any fashion students here who are interested in that, there's a great program called CLO, C-L-O. You can get a 30-day free trial. You probably have already told your students all that. If you haven't, play with it. It's an amazing 3D software. That's one of the programs that we're working with at FitMatch. Also with Alvanon Dress Forms has started their own 3D side of things. I mean, it's definitely the wave of the future. And I support it in the sense, like, I still believe in working with your hands, but I support it in the sense that we have so much waste when you go through a development process in fashion, right, Stephanie? I see totally, right? You draw a paper pattern, you got all these scraps, and you cut your first muslin, you got all of the scraps, you sew, you have to redo it. You're like, by the end of the day, like one shirt, you've got like a box full of trash, and it's just gotten it's too much. So it has to be a way to at least scale at least that initial process down. And by the time you go to your first sample, you know, you've got the one thing on a hanger, you don't have a box full of trash. So that's where I see that going and where my interests are at the moment.
Thank you. That's awesome. Well, when you're in Florida, you need to or Miami, you need to make sure to stop into the Kopenhaver Center at FIU and meet Lillian. You're going to be in the neighborhood. Say hi, Lillian. Yes. Amazing women should spend time together.
That is so fantastic. When Bethany contacted me and I was reading through what she said, I'm like, Florida, you got to be kidding me. I'm like, I just made these. And here's like from Stevens to connection.
Right? Yeah, there's your tribe. You got it.
I told her initially that I was interested in meeting you, Lillian, and then talking to you further, and maybe meeting up in Florida and seeing what it is that you're doing on your end.
Great. Thanks. Thanks for doing this for us, Amy.
We would love to have you. So when you're coming here, let us know.
Fantastic. It'll be next week.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, be in contact and we'll be in contact with you.
Perfect. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, and that really goes back to, you know, making connections and collaborating with people and saying yes. And yeah.
Yeah, not that I would ever say no to Stevens, but saying yes to things like this introduces you, you know, to a lot of other amazing people on a lot of other amazing tracks that converge at these very cool moments.
Well, we have just a couple minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions for Amy? All right. Okay, well, Amy, thank you so much for being with us today. This was amazing, and we really appreciate it. We're gonna keep calling you back here, but no, it was such a pleasure, and thank you all for being with us today. Also,
It's nice to see and hear your questions, and to know that these conversations are valuable to other people too.
yes, absolutely, and yeah, and thank you also to the Kopenhaver Center and Dr. Kopenhaver. And we look forward to continuing to partner with the center and Rowan University for more great workshops coming up. So thank you again, Amy and everyone, and take care, everyone.